This is Fabiola Martinez, and I'm going to show you how to create a bean stitch using your Hatch Embroidery 3 program. Super simple thing to do. So there's a couple of things that are helpful to know when you are starting to set up creating a motif. And one of the things is, in my view anyway, I prefer to use the metric system. And let me say a couple of reasons why I do like that. The next thing that I'm going to have you do is come up to your grid setting and change your grid setting to, in this case, I'm going to tell you, let's set it up for a 5mm grid spacing. Now, the reason why I'm selecting 5, it's fairly small, but not super tiny. But when I'm in the sewing part of my sewing machines, the maximum stitch length that my machine is capable of stitching is a 5mm stitch. And therefore, I can visualize how big a 5mm stitch is quite easily. And the other thing about a 5mm bean stitch is that it's going to be a very useful size when you are digitizing, but you can always change the sizes of your motif after you have created them when you are actually using them. So this doesn't mean that the only size of a bean stitch you're going to be able to digitize is going to be the 5mm long. This is just going to be our beginning. So you'll be able to make it shorter in your designs, or you could even make it longer in your designs if you want to. So let's set our grid for 5mm and let's say okay. You'll notice now on the screen that my screen grid looks quite a bit smaller. And I'm just going to zoom in here. And to create this grid, or this stitch, what we're going to do is we're just going to come to our digitize toolbox and we're going to select our open shape tool. We're next going to use our single run stitch. And the next thing, back to talking about a 5mm long stitch, is we're going to select our stitch setting down here. And for our stitch length, let's make it even longer than a 5mm. Let's go ahead and take it on up to, I'm just going to try to perceive what I might use this stitch for sometime in the future. I definitely know I want it for longer than 5mm. And I think that I'm probably going to take it all the way up to about 9mm long. That would be the maximum that would be allowed probably if I were to create this stitch and actually use it later. So let's make it at a 9mm, and now let's draw our stitch. And it's so simple to do. You just zoom in here so you can see quite closely on your grid. You're going to start at the left point of it and you'll put a stitch point, and let's just count 5 times. Okay, so this is stitch number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So they're basically just piled up one on top of another. Okay, let's say enter, and now our stitch has been created, and you just see it here on the screen. It looks just like a single stitch. You know, if you wanted to really play around with these stitch settings, there's some other things that you could do. You could get these stitch points and you could actually move them slightly off of one another so that they're not piled up exactly on top of one another. The other thing that I like to do with when I am creating motifs is I like to come over to my stitching mode here, and I like to turn off the tie off because I don't want this to create a little knot after that stitch is created. So I'm going to turn the tie off. All right. Or I could actually say I could turn it back on if my next connector is what? This one right here is saying if it's less than 2mm, if it's more than 2mm before the next stitch starts, then it would tie off. But in this case, I'm just don't want to confuse you, but I'm just going to turn it off for right now. And I'm also going to turn all of the ties off for now. Okay, so now let's create a stitch motif. Select your stitch. Come on up to this little icon up here on your toolbar, which is called the Create Motif, and select it. Now what we need to do is we need to create a category for our stitch to live in so that we can find it again later. Now, if this is the first time you've ever created a motif, you're going to have to make yourself a category. So I'm just select on the new, and I'm going to type in bean stitches. All right, that's the name of my new category. So it's okay now. I need to give my pattern a name, and I'm going to call this a 5 stitch. I'm going to abbreviate here, 5 stitch, and I'm going to call it 5mm. 5 stitch, 5mm. I don't want a big long name because it actually won't show up very well when I'm actually using these stitches. 5 stitches, 5mm long, and I'll say okay. Down on the left part of our toolbar, hopefully this is showing up in the recording, it's telling us to set the starting point of the reference line. So my starting point is right here on the left-hand side. And the next, you'll notice down on the bottom, it tells us to enter the end point of the reference line. And I'm going to hold down my control key as I'm doing this because I want this to be a straight line. And I'm clicking again, and now my 5-stitch 5mm has been created in that category of bean stitches. And I can just say okay. I will click off of it, and let's just make ourselves a little open shaped line using it. So let's select the motif. This is the stitch right now that we just now created. And let's just make ourselves a little line. I'm digitizing always from left to right when I use these kinds of motifs. And there's our line, and you can see that it looks quite chunky when we zoom in on it. If you wanted to actually watch it stitch out in slow motion, let's make it go really, really slow. You can see that it's stitching on top of itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on to the next stitch. That's how easy it is to create a motif stitch. All right, and the sky is the limit in creating motif stitches and then being able to use them in embroidery designs. Once again, this is Fabiola Martinez. I thank you for watching the video, and I hope it helps. Bye for now.